Hey, everybody. I appreciate how hard you're working. We're still trucking along here. Only about 5 to 6 more weeks to go. Hopefully, it will go by quickly so that you guys can get summer vacation. But in the meantime, remember, everybody is working super hard. We're going to be finishing up our nonfiction text on the Revolutionary War. Like always, you remember you listen to the video and then you do the one assignment that is listed. Some people are still not listening to the videos, and you're going to miss out on our novel studies. And once we start the I Survived book, I will usually ask you some questions on your Google quizzes based on the book, okay? And I don't want anybody missing out on those or missing questions because you did not listen in the video, okay? I don't mind once we get to that if you go back and watch the video as you're answering questions in a different tab. I'm okay with that if you want to watch it again to help you with those answers. But you've got to be listening as I teach every day and then doing your assignment, okay? Chapter 9, the end of the war. While Washington was busy fighting in the Northeast, the British were taking over the South. In 1778, British troops captured Savannah, Georgia, which is not that far from us. A few weeks later, they took Augusta, Georgia, and Charleston, South Carolina also fell to the British, so all places that are kind of around where we're at located. By the summer of 1780, the British held much of the South. In South Carolina, Francis Marion organized a militia. Now, in your South Carolina history last year, you might have learned that he's the Swamp Fox. The men called themselves Marion's Brigade. Marion and his men were fearless. They attacked without warning. Believe me, we needed somebody like him in the South, with most of it already being captured. Then they would slip away into the swamps. Remember, they were always really good about using the land. So in the South, that was the swampy area that they would sneak away into. Marion's brigade finally helped clear the British out of South Carolina. George Washington sent soldiers to help the Patriots. Slowly, luck turned in the South. The colonists began to defeat the British. The British retreat to Yorktown. In March 1781, the British suffered a big loss in North Carolina. That was the battle at Guilford Courthouse. General Cornwallis commanded the British soldiers. Cornwallis had helped defeat Washington in New York. After this defeat, Cornwallis and his men retreated north to Yorktown, Virginia. So basically, every time we won in a state or at a battle and they retreated, they ran a little bit farther up north each time. The Battle of Yorktown. In August 1781, Washington and his soldiers marched to Yorktown. There they had joined French troops who had come to help. Remember, it was Marquis de Lafayette, using his power being from a rich French Marquis family, to ask and beg for the French soldiers to come and help out the American colonists like the Germans were helping the British. The American troops greatly outnumbered the British troops. It's about time. Cornwallis expected British ships to sail up the York River, bringing more soldiers to help, and this did not happen. So the British general was sitting there waiting for more soldiers, and they just never came. So the Americans fought their way toward the British. When they got close enough, they shelled them with cannon fire. Meanwhile, French ships arrived to help the Patriots, and they cut off any possibility of a British escape by water. Now remember, every time before in a battle, if the British lost, they retreated, same as the Patriots. Retreat, remember, means to run away with no one getting captured. But if the French ships are cutting off the way that they were going to escape, now there is no way for them to retreat. The British had fought their final battle of the war because now the British troops could be captured. It says when Washington spotted the French ships coming to his rescue, he jumped up and down and waved his hat. He knew it was finally over. The British give up. On October 17, 1781, a drummer boy marched out from the British side. He beat a signal on his drum. A British officer walked beside him. He waved a white handkerchief. Everyone knew this was a sign of surrender. One by one, the guns fell silent. Washington accepted the British surrender. 2 days later, British soldiers laid down their muskets before the Americans. Then the French and the Americans formed opposite lines. The lines stretched a mile long. George Washington sat on his horse at the head of his men. By this point, half the British army in America had been captured or killed. As the British Army band played, these soldiers marched off the battlefield. Their fighting was finally over. The British band played an old army tune called The The World Turned Upside Down. Why do you think they would play a tune called The World Turned Upside Down? Comment below in the comment section and tell me why that would be a good choice to play at the British surrender. The World Turned Upside Down. Washington's Farewell. Peace talks began in Paris. They lasted 2 years. In September 1783, the Treaty of Paris ended the American Revolution. In December, George Washington gathered his officers to say farewell. He walked around the room, shaking hands and embracing his men. As Washington did this, he began to weep. Soon all the men were weeping with him. They had been through terrible times together. At last, their dream of a free country had come true. Then Washington rode away to his beloved home, Mount Vernon. He arrived on Christmas Eve. He didn't know he would soon have to leave his home again, this time to serve as the first president of the United States. This is colonists celebrating his victory, George Washington riding his horse named Nelson. The importance of the war. Everyone was overjoyed that the war was over, but America still had a very long road ahead. A new country needed to be created, a country with freedom and justice for all. The patriots of the American Revolution suffered great hardships for their liberty. Many left their family for years. Many risked death, disease, and freezing water, but they did not give up. They remain our heroes today. Their struggles taught us that ordinary people can do amazing things, and these things, they can change the world. Now, that is an excellent theme for our nonfiction book. Our message, and we're going to hear that over and over again in I Survived as well. Listen to it again. Their struggles taught us that ordinary people can do amazing things, and these things can change the world. And remember that tune, The World Turned Upside Down. This was a timeline. We've looked at nonfiction text features this year. Here's a timeline of some things that happened in the Revolutionary War. The French and Indian War, remember, originally is what got the British in debt to the point where they started taxing the colonists in 1765. After that was the Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party, just one thing right after another that brought about more contention between the British and the Patriots and the American colonists. And then the battle, Lexington and Concord, the shot heard around the world, supposedly. Right after that, the Battle of Bunker Hill. Remember, we're going to hear that again, Battle of Bunker Breeds Hill, and I survived. Then Washington took over. He had them write the Declaration of Independence. Then we had the Battle of Long Island, Washington crossing the Delaware, the Battle of Trenton, Battle of Saratoga, Valley Forge, and then finally the surrender at Yorktown, then the Treaty of Paris in 1783. But remember, they fought for a very, very long time, at least 6 years of fighting, longer than that until we got to the treaty. So now you know about how we got our freedom. Okay, so now we're going to take this nonfiction book tomorrow. We're going to start reading I Survived the American Revolution, which is going to be historical fiction. So we'll talk about what that is at the beginning of the video, kind of retrace our brain, our memory as we talk about what those different genres of fiction versus nonfiction were. And then we're going to start weaving and making connections and seeing what we hear that's the same in both books. And I'll have you guys comment in the comment section when you hear things that you might have heard in this book. So hopefully you guys have listened to these chapters. And now we have some background knowledge. So usually I flip back and forth between the books, but I think this way it was important that we built some background knowledge so that we know what we're talking about as we read the other book. All right, guys, complete today's assignment that's listed under the YouTube video, as well as the language assignment so we can get in some language grades. I'll see you guys later. Bye.